Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump slapping what he calls massive sanctions on Russia. That's as the summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin is put on hold, and the White House responds to Ballroom backlash, Mariotu reports. Vice President J.D. Vance says he's optimistic about the Gaza peace plan. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice says Israel must cooperate with a UN agency that Israel says is linked to Hamas. Jason Perry has the details. North Carolina lawmakers approved the redrawing of the state's congressional map. The move could give Republicans an additional seat. And the White House plans to reopen offices of the Farm Service Agency. It's to help farmers access $3 billion in aid that's been delayed by the government shutdown. Luis Adoro Martinez on Capitol Hill.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump slapping what he calls tremendous sanctions on Russia as he puts the Putin summit on hold, and the White House responding to backlash over ballroom renovations. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotu, who's at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from President Trump's meeting with the NATO Secretary General?
Tiff, good evening. President Trump is now imposing what he calls, quote, tremendous sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies as he calls on Moscow for an immediate ceasefire with the war in Ukraine. This is happening as President Trump confirms canceling his Budapest summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Take a look.
Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies. And we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. When we canceled the meeting with President Putin, it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get. So
President Trump also calls on U.S. allies to enforce the same sanctions and says that he hopes that these sanctions will help Putin, quote, become reasonable. And on other foreign affairs, President Trump confirms that he has what he calls a pretty long meeting scheduled with CCP leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines of APEC in South Korea. President Trump says that he's optimistic about a deal where China buys American soybeans. He also says he thinks that Xi Jinping can have a, quote, big influence on Putin and help end the war in Ukraine. Tiff?
Definitely a lot to look out for there before his Asia trip. Now, Mari, on a different topic closer to home, though, what's the White House been saying about the ballroom renovations?
Sure, Tiff. So those renovations have been getting quite a lot of attention as construction has begun in the East Wing this week. President Trump just a little while ago responded to criticism about the East Wing renovations for his ballroom, which have included lawmakers and public officials, with Governor Gavin Newsom, for example, posting on X that President Trump is, quote, ripping apart the White House just like he's ripping apart the Constitution. And some media are juxtaposing the timing of the government shutdown with images of the construction. Take a look.
Take literally a wrecking ball to the White House.
I can't.
It's grotesque. Just grotesque.
That is the people's building. You don't own it.
But the White House is calling the backlash, quote, manufactured outrage.
And I believe there's a lot of fake outrage right now because nearly every single president who has lived in this beautiful White House behind me has made modernizations and renovations of their own.
Releasing a statement documenting the history of presidents renovating and expanding the White House, beginning with President Roosevelt in 1902.
And the best part of it all, it's not a dime of the taxpayers' money. The president has worked hard to privately fund this entire project from start to finish.
The White House also cites other former presidents who have asked for a larger event space to welcome world leaders to the White House. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. Russia announces a major training exercise involving nuclear weapons, and Ukraine and NATO officials say President Trump's idea to freeze the current front lines is a good compromise. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the war update.
The president himself was very clear this weekend: stop where you are, which sounds simple, but of course is also exactly right. So I totally agree with him.
NATO chief Mark Rutte says he supports President Trump's call for Ukraine and Russia to stop at the current front lines and implement a ceasefire. Rutte spoke with 2 senators on Wednesday morning, before meeting with Trump in the afternoon. The senators announced that they've advanced 3 bills on the Russia-Ukraine war. One of them would aim at stopping China's support for Russia. Another would declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism because of its alleged kidnapping of Ukrainian children. And the third would allow the US to move forward with using frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Europe, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky also says he supports Trump's idea to freeze the current front lines.
You saw messages, public messages from Trump. He proposed stay where we stay and begin conversation. I think that was good compromise, but I'm not sure that Putin will support, and I said it to President.
The Ukrainian president made the remarks while visiting Sweden and Norway. Sweden has signed a letter of intent to potentially supply up to 150 of its domestically produced Gripen fighter jets to Ukraine.
If we succeed, it will contribute to increased security in our part of the world and will strengthen both Ukraine and Sweden.
And Russia announces carrying out a major nuclear drill on Wednesday. It includes practice launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are capable of striking the United States. Just on Tuesday, President Trump said plans for a second summit between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin are on hold. Putin emphasizes that Wednesday's drills have been planned in advance, but they came just hours after Trump's announcement. Russian officials say preparations for a meeting continue. The fighting between Russia and Ukraine continues meanwhile. Russian drones reportedly hit a kindergarten in Kharkiv on Wednesday, while children were in the building. According to officials, 1 person was killed and 6 were injured, but no children were physically harmed.
Fortunately, the children were in a shelter during the air raid. 48 children were rescued by our state emergency service units.
Zelensky says despite not being physically harmed, many of the kids were in shock after the attack. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Vice President J.D. Vance says he's optimistic about the Gaza peace plan as he meets with Israel's prime minister. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice says Israel must cooperate with a UN agency that Israel says is linked to Hamas. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife welcomed Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife on Wednesday. Israel's government spokesperson said Vance and Netanyahu had in-depth discussions about the Gaza Strip and how they see the peace plan progressing in the near future.
The president believes very strongly that if Israel honestly, with our Gulf Arab allies, can play a very positive leadership role in this region, to where, frankly, the United States can care less about the Middle East because our allies in the region are stepping up and taking control and taking ownership of their area of the world.
A strong Israel serves America's interest in stabilizing this very unstable region. And you can't stabilize it without a strong Israel. So we make the decisions for the security of Israel, but we make common decisions for the region, which I think can serve us both.
As for which countries will participate in the international security force in the Gaza Strip, Netanyahu hinted that Israel was not planning to allow Turkey to be a part of that security force. The president of Turkey previously described Hamas terrorists as resistance fighters trying to protect their land and called Israel a, quote, terrorist state. Vance also met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who said that Vance was, quote, another brick in building the future for peace. And according to Israel's government spokesperson, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also set to visit Israel this week. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, residents were seen digging what appeared to be a mass grave. According to Hamas's media office, residents were planning to bury the bodies of 54 unidentified Palestinians recently returned by Israel. And in another development, the International Court of Justice, or ICJ, which is supported by the United Nations, said Israel must support the relief efforts provided by the UN in the Gaza Strip, as well as the UN Relief and Works Agency, also known as UNRWA. President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, recently said that coordination between Israel and the UN was strong. However, Israel said they previously provided the UN with evidence of Hamas infiltration into UNRWA. And in a post on X, the U.S. Department of State said the ICJ, quote, unfairly bashes Israel and gives UNRWA a free pass for its deep entanglement with and material support for Hamas terrorism. Jason Berry, NTD News.
The construction of a new ballroom has officially begun at the White House, starting with the demolition of the East Wing. President Trump says he will pay out of his own pocket for parts of the project, and some anonymous donors will be chipping in as well. Do everyday Americans support the move? NTD's Sam Wong was right outside the White House to hear from the people.
What are your thoughts on the construction of this new ballroom that is coming down the pipeline?
It's great. I think it's great. A lot of presidents have added to the White House in the past. So Trump's not doing anything new, really.
Obscene is a word that comes to mind. I grew up here in D.C., and I find it to be really offensive what's happening. I think is an agenda that's antithetical to the history of the country.
Doesn't really affect us either way. We're excited for renovations.
Yeah, like I said, like I told you before, it doesn't really affect us.
Everybody renovates.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, he's putting his own money into it. It's not affecting our tax dollars, so.
I look at the pictures and it just kind of tells me what's going on in this country. It's just broken down and opened up and looking pretty ugly at the moment.
I'm glad to see he's actually doing something to maintain, bring it back up, make it more useful for future presidents and the future of the country. I hope I can have a ball there, but I doubt I ever will. We have seen past presidents doing similar things before, renovating the White House, building new things, and this one, President Trump says he's paying out of his own pocket. What makes this one so different?
I don't think it was, whatever renovations were done here were as drastic.
Well, I think those are comparisons that would be valid if this current president wasn't lying to obtain his goals. With the statement that was recently made by the president that the new building would not affect the old building, which, as you can see behind me, is clearly not the case.
We're hearing a lot of criticism from people like Gavin Newsom and Hillary Clinton. They're saying that President Trump is destroying the White House by doing this. What are your thoughts? What would be your response to it?
It's a wall that he's taken down to enlarge another room. I mean, we know of certain president built a tennis court, then a swimming pool, took out the swimming pool, then did a tennis court. I mean, totally annihilated the lawn.
There's been many renovations of the White House throughout the years. I mean, there was at one point in time the entire White House was gutted back in like the 1930s, 1940s, and it was brought up to standard construction with steel interiors and everything to make it more hardened structure because, well, we were at war. It was World War II.
Just calm down. There's nothing you can do. Just calm down, quit being so picky, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be fine. Everybody will enjoy it in the future. For posterity is the word.
North Carolina Republicans have remapped one of the state's U.S. House districts. The redistricting comes as GOP lawmakers hope to pick up one more seat to maintain their majority. Democrats have responded by redrawing their own lines in blue states. A president's party historically loses seats in midterm elections, and Democrats need just 3 more seats to gain control of the House. Texas and Missouri have already revised their House districts to try to help Republicans win additional seats. Democratic-led California retaliated by asking the state's voters to approve a map revised to elect more Democrats. The Supreme Court is currently considering a redistricting case in Louisiana. The High Court's decision would have a nationwide impact on the practice of redrawing district lines known as gerrymandering. It's day 22 of the government shutdown, now officially the second longest in American history. The White House and Senate Republicans continue their efforts to keep federal workers paid and reopen the government, while House and Senate Democrats double down on their messaging and demands. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
Saluting the senator from Oregon, Senator Merkley, for standing strong and long in defense of our democracy and our Constitution, and ringing the alarm bells. Authoritarianism is here.
Senate Democrats have been taking turns for over 18 hours asking questions on the Senate floor as Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley delivers a marathon-long speech accusing the Trump administration of being authoritarian, while House Democrats warn of the impending impact that SNAP beneficiaries will endure starting November 1st when aid stops being delivered in most states.
If this shutdown
of the federal government by Donald Trump and Republicans continue, folks may even lose nutritional assistance benefits that they depend on to feed themselves, their children, and their families and keep food on the table.
The Trump administration has managed thus far to reallocate funds to pay active duty military personnel and keep the Women, Infant, and Children program, otherwise known as WIC, afloat during the government shutdown.
At this point, I just want to get the government open at this point. It's not blaming or who's winning or who's losing, because they guarantee who is losing, and that's Americans right now. I am now fighting to opening because of the 2 million Pennsylvanians that are on SNAP, and those funds are running out. 2 million people in Pennsylvania depend on this to feed themselves and their family.
The Trump administration also announced this Tuesday it would be reallocating $3 billion to reopen Farm Service Agency offices and resume aid to farmers. House Republicans and Senate Republicans continue to offer exit ramps for Democrats to reopen government or alleviate the pain on the federal workforce.
What we're talking about is that obviously the calendar is being eaten up by all this political nonsense by the Democrats. We're running out of time to do very important, necessary things.
The Senate will vote today for a 12th time on a continuing resolution to reopen government, and Senate Republicans have teed up a vote for a bill on Thursday to pay the federal workforce. Both bills are expected to fail without Democratic support. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And here in the Big Apple, the three candidates running to be the next mayor of New York City will face off for the last time tonight. The debate is taking place at LaGuardia Community College in Queens. It'll begin at 7 p.m. Eastern and is expected to be 1.5 hours long. We'll bring you highlights and analysis tomorrow morning. The debate is co-hosted by Spectrum News, NY1, WNYC, Gothamist, and a few other local organizations. Among the three candidates, the latest poll by AARP put Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani at 43%, former Governor Andrew Cuomo at 29%, and Guardian Angels founder Curtis Sliwa at 19%. Sliwa has recently faced calls to drop out of the race, but he says he's not going anywhere. A U.S. Marshal and a TikTok influencer are shot in Southern California during a recent ICE operation. The shooting comes amid growing tensions over immigration enforcement in the region. Christina Corona reports. And Turning Point USA's latest stop at Indiana University, Bloomington, draws a large student crowd and a night of debate and discussion. Chris Bob has details from the event when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Louvre Museum in Paris reopened today, just days after crown jewels were stolen. In a dramatic daytime heist, thieves made off with historical treasures considered priceless. 100 investigators are now involved in the hunt for suspects and gems after Sunday's theft from the world's most visited museum. As the investigation moves forward, authorities say several key clues have now been found as police follow what they describe as a serious lead. NTD international correspondent David Vance reports from Paris.
The investigation into the dramatic theft at the Louvre Museum is moving forward, according to French authorities, 3 days after the robbery, as around 100 officers from a specialized police unit is working around the clock on the case. Several crucial clues have been found. Police unions said today they are now following a serious lead. They confirmed that key evidence, including a motorcycle helmet, a glove, and several tools used during the break-in, has been recovered. Police also located the construction lift used by the thieves, which had been stolen earlier this month from a company near Paris. The employee who met the suspects before the theft is now considered a crucial witness. Authorities also revealed that Louvre employees tried to resist the robbers, forcing them to abandon the crown and preventing them from setting fire to the aerial bucket, leaving even more evidence for investigators. While the Paris prosecutor estimated the robbery at up to $100 million, that figure only reflects the piece's individual market value, though their true worth is considered priceless. Several experts, including art historian Eric Anso, say one hypothesis is that a private collector may have ordered the heist.
I almost hope that's the case, that the theft was ordered by a wealthy, eccentric collector who will keep the pieces for himself, rather than thieves who might dismantle everything, removing over 7,000 diamonds, 200 emeralds, 50 rubies, 50 sapphires, and 200 pearls. Otherwise, that would be an irreparable loss.
Parliamentary inquiry is being prepared to review security in French museums after reports revealed that 1/3 of the rooms in the Louvre's Apollo Gallery lack surveillance cameras. The Justice Minister admitted, "We have failed to protect the country's cultural treasures," calling the heist a national embarrassment. Other recent cases of robbery in French museums have also been reported.
There needs to be a real awakening in our museums, and we must rethink our priorities. I remind you that for several months now, there have been a series of extraordinary museums being robbed. Even this very morning, we learned that one of our museums was broken into. So clearly, we must take a very close and serious look at this situation.
The Louvre's director offered her resignation to President Emmanuel Macron, but he refused it, saying she would be needed to lead the museum's renovation plan. She will be heard in the Senate today to explain how the robbery could happen in the world's most visited museum. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
A U.S. Marshal and a social media influencer are shot during an ICE operation in South Los Angeles. The incident comes amid heightened tensions over immigration enforcement in the state. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
A U.S. Marshal and Carlitos Ricardo Parias, a TikTok influencer known as Richard L.A., were both wounded by gunfire from an ICE agent during an operation in South Los Angeles Tuesday morning. Officials say the shooting happened around 8:50 a.m. in the 400 block of East 20th Street. According to acting U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley, agents boxed in 44-year-old Parias when he allegedly rammed his car into federal vehicles in an attempt to flee. Officers then opened fire. The Marshal was struck in the finger by a ricocheted bullet while Parias was shot in the arm. Both were hospitalized and are expected to recover. If convicted, Parias can face up to 8 years in federal prison. The shooting comes during rising tensions between federal agents and local officials. Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin said the incident occurred after, quote, sanctuary politicians held webinars and provided resources and tips for how to openly defy ICE. She added that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hosted a webinar in February providing tips for illegal aliens to evade arrests at homes, workplaces, and in public. McLaughlin also said California Governor Gavin Newsom has released guidance advising illegal immigrants on how to block ICE entry, while Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has issued multilingual flyers and online resources explaining how to evade arrest. On Wednesday, Attorney General Pam Bondi warned that a proposed Democratic online platform tracking ICE operations in Los Angeles could put federal agents at risk. Representative Robert Garcia said at a press conference Tuesday that Democrats on the House Oversight Committee plan to launch a master ICE tracker.
And so today I want to announce that the House Oversight Committee, Democrats, are going to record and create an investigative unit here to ensure that in Los Angeles, we look into every single brutal misconduct that ICE is committing.
He went on to say Democrats want full access to ICE records and enforcement actions.
Beginning today, we are demanding that all records and documents, particularly when citizens have also been detained, and how officers are treating citizens and those being detained, are available to our committee.
White House border czar Tom Homan says assaults on ICE officers have risen more than 1,000%. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The Turning Point USA tour made its latest stop last night at Indiana University Bloomington, drawing a large student crowd for a night of debate and discussion. Political commentator Tucker Carlson took the stage answering questions from students, with Indiana Governor Mike Brown giving a warm-up speech. NTD's Chris Bob was there.
Don't ever be embarrassed of Main Street and the values that we embrace, again, on faith, family, and community.
I'm outside the auditorium at Indiana University Bloomington, where a Turning Point USA tour stop just took place. It was a Q&A between students and Tucker Carlson.
Who are the people that are like a part of this movement that's attacking your freedom of speech? I feel like we hear woke so much, especially from conservatives. I'm personally not one, but we never really hear like what it means.
At its core, woke is an attempt by the powerful to make the less powerful shut up.
Why are you only against the more powerful when it's supporting things like human rights and BLM, but you're for it when it's supporting Donald Trump?
So the amount of influence that you carried.
So you don't agree. Look, you don't agree with my views.
No, that's not what I'm getting at. Tucker,
so you're saying my views are insincere?
No, we disagree. Yes, I truly doubt your sincerity, and I think at
well,
this
then
point
that's
in your career,
then that's your problem.
I'm trying to understand it because it makes no sense. Like you're worth $50 million.
I'm not worth $50 million.
We spoke to a couple of the students who attended the speech. Here's what they had to say. Did you learn anything?
I think I did learn a little bit. I especially learned a little bit about, I'm more conservative, and I think I learned a little bit about the other side from a couple of the questions that were asked. So it was certainly useful.
It was exciting. This is the turning point. So it did get me reassured in my values and more motivated to live those out on campus and in my life.
Because I'm a leftist myself, I'm a leftist and I'm an atheist, and I had a really meaningful conversation with this guy who was waiting in the Q&A line with me, who was a conservative Christian, and I think we were able to really have an open dialogue that was more focused on curiosity with each other's point of view rather than kind of trying to disprove the other side. And so I think in terms of these large events, I think it's more meaningful to have small-scale dialogue with people because I think a lot of people are aligned on the same types of things, but they just wouldn't know it because of the rhetoric that is used by both sides in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's less to do with Turning Point USA's personal thing and more the political climate in the United States. You'll see people are here to just dunk on liberals and boo them off stage.
In Indiana, Governor Mike Brown has officially declared October 21st as Turning Point USA Civic Engagement Day. It recognizes Turning Point's work in helping students develop leadership skills and engage in civic discourse. The next stop on the Turning Point USA tour is October 27th at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. Coming up, China's military power shakeup, why the purge of top generals could expose a political crisis for Xi Jinping. Jack Bradley has the details. And U.S. and Chinese delegates will meet in Malaysia for trade talks amid heightened tensions. Author James Gorey joins us to explore what we could expect to see when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. With China's Communist Party holding a key Central Committee meeting this week, a shakeup inside the military has deepened. What began as the expulsion of 9 top generals now appears to be spreading into a full-blown purge. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Amid a major Chinese Communist Party Central Committee meeting, 9 top generals were suddenly expelled and handed over for investigation last week. Now, a whistleblower claims that the purge goes far beyond that. U.S.-based veteran political commentator Tsai Shen-kun, who has ties within the CCP establishment, told our sister media, the Epoch Times, this. He said, quote, "There are still hundreds of generals waiting in line for investigation. The so-called Xi faction within the military has been essentially wiped out." Shen-kun says that at least 4 more top generals are now under investigation, and many of those already purged were handpicked by Chinese leader Xi Jinping himself. Shen-kun also says that 2 of those already expelled from the party last week are now dead. He Weidong, considered Xi Jinping's right-hand man, was the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. He reportedly died of a heart attack. And the other general loyal to Xi, He Hongjun, dying of suicide. Now, Beijing has not confirmed those deaths, and China's defense ministry says that the expulsions are part of an anti-corruption campaign started by Xi Jinping himself back in 2012. But now, the sweep appears to be turning inward, targeting Xi's inner circle. The CCP is made up of different factions, with the Xi opposition faction working to undermine his power. Now, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, one of those CCP officials in the Xi opposition faction, Li Chengong, may have issued those rare earth export restrictions without Xi's knowledge.
The Chinese system is quite brittle, so this may not have come from Xi Jinping himself. This may have come, from a Chinese hardliner. They have hardliners on their side too, who are always trying to undermine the relationship.
But analysts say that nothing gets by without Xi knowing.
it probably was a decision by Xi to put these export controls, these export licensing on the rare earths into place. He thinks it's the right time to strike. As your report just noted, the APEC summit in Korea was coming up. This really shook things up regarding that, perhaps gave China some more leverage.
With the closed-door meeting of the CCP leadership taking place, it remains to be seen if there will be a power shift coming out of it. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party's grip on China is showing cracks. Tonight, NTD's Steve Lance sits down with Stephen Mosher, a renowned China scholar who's been decoding the CCP since the 1980s.
It makes no sense for Xi Jinping himself, who has only the support of his faction, to begin removing members of that faction. The only sector of the Chinese economy that actually works according to market principles is the export sector. The export sector only works because of access to the American market. The Chinese economy is in for some very, very dark days ahead. And I believe that the sooner the collapse comes, the sooner Xi Jinping will be forced to either step back to what he called the second line or to be forced out of power altogether.
Uncover the truth tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are heading to Malaysia to meet with their Chinese counterparts. This comes amid heightened tensions after China recently announced broad rare earth export controls. And today, during his White House meeting with NATO Secretary Mark Rutte, President Trump confirmed that he will meet with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping, adding that it will be a long meeting and that he expects China to start buying U.S. soybeans again. Joining us now to explore is James Gorey, author of The China Crisis, Epoch Times contributor, and writer of the Banana Republican blog. James, thank you so much for joining us. First, what are you watching for in these talks between Bessent, Greer, and their Chinese counterparts? How likely are we to see a trade deal?
I think we're very likely to see a trade deal. I think this is China's trump card, if you will, in their answer to the tariffs, as well as it mirroring the U.S. export controls on advanced chips. So China's playing the card that they have, that they know will get people to the table. It's certainly getting the U.S. to the table. I might add that Brussels, the trade representative from Brussels, has talked to the trade representative from China and said they want to talk about this rare earth export controls as well. So it's a big deal.
Digging into that, Greer was telling CNBC that Beijing's rare earth curb expansion was, quote, incredibly aggressive. It was totally disproportional to anything that the U.S., the EU, or Canada, or anybody did. How likely are we to see a softening from Beijing on this, or will we see those 100% additional tariffs that President Trump threatened in response to kick in on November 1st?
Well, I think it's difficult to say absolutely, but I would say in the greater context, if you look what China announced through one of their ministers in September on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, he went on record saying that words to the effect that China would view any attack, conventional or nuclear, as cause for a nuclear response or some other high-level response. And that's a rhetorical level that hasn't been seen in a long while, and from China. So at the same time, they're aggressively pursuing war games around Taiwan, and that's picked up in 2025. So those are contextual issues. It's not just trade; it's national security, and then put in that context, add this layer of Xi Jinping purging his latest handpicked generals. I guess 8 or 9 of them. There's a lot going on. This is a very big deal. This is a very momentous moment, and we'll see what happens. But there's definitely a magnitude, much larger impact on the export controls over rare earths from China than the tariffs, magnitudes. And you can tell by the response from the U.S. and the European Union in a matter of days, within days of each other.
And given the unrest we're seeing inside China, President Trump has said those additional 100% tariffs on China would be unsustainable. What would be the impact, though, on the global economy if these trade tensions continue to escalate? Could we see that decoupling that Bessent mentioned recently?
I think we already are, and I think it needs to happen, and China doesn't want it to happen. But what we're seeing right now is what happens when you can't decouple, or when you're coupled with an adversarial trade partner. It's one thing to be coupled with trading partners like the EU and other blocs in Japan and South Korea, that you more or less have an understandable agreement on rules and on the rules of engagement and so forth. China doesn't want to have that understanding. They want to break the rules and then remake the rules. And so it's a decoupling that is going to happen in one form or another. And I think it's already happening. And we're seeing this meeting is trying to make it less painful for the U.S., and China's trying to make it as painful as possible for the U.S. and Europe as well.
Now, to your point, many have been calling out China's unfair trade practices over the years and its history of breaking promises, as you mentioned. If a deal is reached this time, what type of enforcement do you see the U.S. adding to ensure that China follows through, or what would accountability look like here?
That's a great question. Other trade deals haven't been enforced. There's been forced technology transfers for companies that do business in China with China, but it's been very difficult to enforce China to stick to their end of the bargain. And they're notable for that. And that's a great question. That is the big question: is any agreement worth the paper it's written on?
Well, a lot at stake here for sure. James Gorey, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, a filmmaker says Google's AI has been defaming him, making fake allegations and citing imaginary sources. David Lamb has more about that lawsuit. And in the NFL, a trial date is set for former quarterback Mark Sanchez's case, but has he entered a plea? Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Google is facing a lawsuit over its artificial intelligence products. Robbie Starbuck, a conservative filmmaker, says Google's AI has made fake allegations against him, falsely accusing him of crimes like sexual assault. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Google is being sued by Robbie Starbuck, a conservative social media activist and filmmaker. He says that the tech giant has spread lies about him through its artificial intelligence products for almost 2 years. Starbuck made the announcement on X today.
At one point, Google's AI even stated that my name was in Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs, citing imaginary articles in the New York Post and also one from Mediaite that also says I was suspended by Daily Wire over sexual harassment allegations.
He claims that Google's Bard, Gemini, and Gemma has been defaming him with fake criminal allegations, including sexual assault, child rape, abuse, fraud, stalking, and drug charges. AI usually provides source links when asked for verification, but even then, Starbuck said the AI routinely cited fake sources. According to Starbuck, Google's AI says that he was targeted because of his political views. Google spokesperson Jose Castaneda said most of the claims were related to mistaken hallucinations from Google's Bard large language model, and the company worked to address it in 2023. NTD reached out to Google for further comments but did not hear back by deadline. Starbuck is asking for at least $15 million in damages. David Lamb, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. There's plenty going on right now, but let's start in the NFL as the trial for former quarterback Mark Sanchez has now been set for December 11th. Has Sanchez entered a plea?
No, he has not. Now, they had a pre-trial conference today. Sanchez was not present. He didn't have to be. His lawyer says he was still recovering from the incident. Now, Sanchez has been charged with a felony count of battery along with 3 misdemeanor charges. One of those is public intoxication. Now, Sanchez has not discussed the charges, saying he is focused on his recovery. And he hasn't been in the booth since this happened. This is back on October 4th when he was in Indianapolis to do the Colts-Raiders game. Now, a detective's affidavit says the 38-year-old Sanchez accosted 69-year-old truck driver Perry Toll. Now, Toll says he acted in self-defense after Sanchez entered his truck without permission. Toll is suing Sanchez as well as Fox there. The next hearing in this case will be on November 20. So just an FYI for you. So.
All right, well, elsewhere in the
Still working
league,
on this one.
Okay. Commissioner Roger Goodell says he won't reconsider having Bad Bunny perform the Super Bowl halftime show.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify the amount of blowback and criticism around something. But as far as Super Bowl halftime performers go, I don't think I've ever seen it get to the point where Goodell actually had to address whether he was going to drop a performer because of it. Now let's listen to what Goodell said when he was asked about choosing Bad Bunny.
He's one of the leading and most popular entertainers in the world. That's what we try to achieve. It's an important stage for us. It's an important element to the entertainment value. It's carefully thought through. I would say that I'm not sure we've ever selected an artist where we didn't have some blowback or criticism. It's pretty hard to do when you have literally hundreds of millions of people that are watching. But we're confident it's going to be a great show, and that he understands the platform that he's on, and I think it's going to be exciting and a united moment.
Now, as I mentioned previously, Turning Point USA is planning to do their own halftime show called the All-American Halftime, featuring celebrating faith, family, and freedom. Details like performers, though, are still unknown, so stay tuned on this one, too.
All right, lots of updates from you. Meanwhile, though, in Baltimore, Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson returned to practice today for the first time since injuring his hamstring on September 28th. Has the team announced whether he'll start?
No, they haven't. He was officially listed as a limited participant at practice as opposed to a full participant. Now, he was injured against the Chiefs about 3 weeks ago. The Ravens have not won a game since, though in all fairness, they were only 1-3 up to that point anyway. Right now, they are 1-5 in last place in the AFC North Division. Jackson, meanwhile, who's won 2 MVP awards, of course, is a big part of their team. Now, elsewhere in the league, Washington Commanders will reportedly be without quarterback Jaden Daniels when they play the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. That's according to multiple reports. Now, Daniels suffered a hamstring injury in the third quarter of their loss to Dallas on Sunday. Marcus Mariota then came on in relief of him. Daniels had an MRI then on Monday, showed no significant damage. So just an FYI for all you fantasy football managers like you, Tiff, in case you were thinking about trading for Jaden Daniels, in case someone offered him, for your Patrick Mahomes, which I know you like to hold on to Mahomes. So don't want to see you get ripped off in a trade, all right?
Hey, I won the past few games. Shifting gears to baseball, Toronto's other 2 sports teams, the Raptors and Maple Leafs, are adjusting their game times so that fans can still watch the Blue Jays play in the World Series.
Yeah, I've never seen this happen, by the way. I mean, clearly they are passionate about the Blue Jays winning the World Series. I mean, it's been 32 years since they last won the pennant. Now, games 1 and 2 are on Friday and Saturday, both at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So the Raptors, the Toronto Raptors, the NBA team, are changing the time of their home opener Friday from 7:30 to 6:30. These are Eastern times here. And the NHL's Toronto Maple Leafs are changing their Saturday start time from 7 p.m. to 5 p.m. And they're doing the same thing next week. Games 3, 4, and 5, if necessary, are going to be in Los Angeles. Now, in addition, for fans attending the games at either Raptors or Maple Leafs game, they will show the World Series game on the video board at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, where both the Maple Leafs and the Raptors play. So, Tiff, in case you were planning to go to either of those games, you will still be able to watch the World Series game in case you were worried about missing it, right?
All right, good to know. I'll add that to my plans.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, David Saunders, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.